Well, Norman, the good news is that everyone I speak to say you do a very, very good job and you battle very hard against the odds. But they just say that in terms of the government as a whole, cycling is not treated seriously at all. And the way things are going, in another 10 years' time, we'll still only have about 2% of journeys made by bike. They're saying there's not enough money, the funding stream is only for 2 years, it's not planned long term, like rail networks and the roads. And the basic message that everyone who involved in the cycling world gives me is the fact that the government doesn't treat cycling as a serious thing, which it very much should. I mean, is that wrong? They just say it's piecemeal. It's that you battle as hard as you can, but the kind of big beasts in the cabinet just don't really care.
I'm not sure that's very fair. I mean, we had the Prime Minister himself making the statement in August about the extra funding, the latest tranche of extra funding, which was to come along. If you go back to the previous debate we'd had in Westminster Hall, a very well attended one, people said, let's have the Prime Minister. If you're not serious, the Prime Minister comes along and does it. Well, we've got the Prime Minister along to do it. So I think there is ownership at the top of government about the cycling agenda. Should we do more? Yes, we should. We haven't finished. In my view, we need to go further. Are we where the Netherlands is? No, we aren't. It'd be nice if we got there. But I think we've made enormous progress in the last 3 or 4 years. It may be bitty in pieces, but it has been enormous progress. And I think genuinely the most pro-cycling government this country's had. In terms of funding, I checked the figures, we're actually spending roughly double, 278 million directly against 140 million in this Parliament as against the last Parliament. So we've doubled the funding, and that's without taking into consideration the huge amount of cycling schemes through the Local Sustainable Transport Fund.
But in terms of, last week there was a DfT's official response to the Get Britain Cycling inquiry, and the report from that was, had a whole lot of sensible things we could do. For example, targets the number of people we get on bikes, and a cycling champion and things like that, and more money from other government departments. The DfT essentially turned down pretty much every single one. It was condemned by cycling groups as a very, very disappointing thing. Was that down to you, or was that down to people elsewhere in government saying, I'm afraid we can't be as bold as this?
I don't think it's very disappointing at all. And what's disappointing is the response there's been to it. I mean, it was a step forward. We actually did agree with quite a lot of the cycling report. And of course, when the motion came from the backbench committee on the 2nd of September, the government all voted for it. So we voted for that particular report. And the Lib Dem conference, of course, this week we'll be discussing cycling again, and we'll be taking it further again. And if we're in a position of influence in the next Parliament, we'll be pushing the agenda even further forward. If you take the particular issues you've raised, I mean, I don't actually believe in a cycling champion. So if you want to say that's me, that's me. I think there's this idea that if we had one person up there who was a so-called champion, or even worse, a czar, that would be somehow a good thing. I think actually it would be potentially dangerous, because what it would say to everybody is, oh, here's this person doing it, we can forget about it, they'll do it. I want to own right across government. I want to own by all departments and by all ministers.
But the rest of government isn't really doing much. The Department for Education is not doing much about getting kids cycling to school. Eric Pickles keeps on making these noises about, and you laugh, but it's quite a serious thing, that when the person in charge of planning is telling councils to take out speed bumps and make sure parking charges are low, and telling a local newspaper that people who want more cycling are advocating an elitist form of transport. You can't take a government seriously that says things like that, can you?
Well, look, I mean, any government, you'll find different voices saying different things. But the DfT, of course, understands these issues very well. We have been in the vanguard of this, and across both coalition parties, actually, there's been solid support for cycling, and that's been demonstrated through the 3 Secretaries of State I've worked with and the various other ministers in the department. So that's quite clear. The Prime Minister himself and DPM have endorsed the cycling agenda. So if any ministers are now saying things which are anti-cycling, they're not just ignoring the DfT, they're actually going into Prime Minister. And it's not true to say other departments aren't being helpful. The Department of Health, for example, has been very supportive. Anna Soubry, the Minister there, has been really good. And we've seen money coming from the Department of Health, not as much as I would like, but there's some money coming in there. So yes, other departments are further behind the DfT. They're bound to be, because it's not their primary function. But I think it's unfair to characterise the rest of government as not being supportive.
The worry for me is, I think that for Britain to truly change, because the thing is that everyone agrees that having lots and lots of British people on bikes would be a wonderful thing. But to do it, countries in the past, like the Netherlands and Denmark, have shown you need someone to be bold. And I think the worry is that there's people doing piecemeal changing and there's no boldness. Can you convince me people that actually have got the vision of a different Britain?
I think we have got the vision of a different Britain, and I think we've, dare I say, pulled the Conservatives quite a long way along that particular road. But I would say that from where we were in 2010, I'm not dishing the last government. I mean, they did some good stuff with demonstration cities and so on. But I mean, from what we were in 2010, when actually the public at large weren't particularly interested in cycling, to where we are now, I think in 3 years there's been tremendous progress. Yes, we've got to go further, and we intend to do so.